In this video, we're going to compare the image quality of the Nikon Z6 II with the Nikon Z7 II. So the Z6 II is a 24 megapixel full frame camera, and the Z7 II is a 45 megapixel full frame camera. So here in Lightroom, I have a bunch of landscape shots that I captured with both of those cameras so that we can do some side-by-side comparisons. And also, all of these images here, they are unprocessed RAW files, except for I do have some unprocessed downscale TIFF files as well that we'll look at. So let's go ahead and get into the first comparison here. And so here we have the Z6 II on the left, Z7 II on the right. Now keep in mind that when we are looking at the images on a global level like this, you're just not going to be able to see much difference at all. You know, each image here is taking up about 4 to 4.5 megapixels of area on my computer monitor. So, you know, when you take a 24 megapixel image and a 45 megapixel image and you look at them both at 4.5 megapixels, there's just not going to be much of a perceptible difference there. So what we're going to do is just zoom into 100%. And this way we have a 1-to-1 pixel ratio between the images and the computer monitor. So let's go ahead and take a peek at what's going on here. Kind of line these up a little bit. And here you can kind of notice that resolution difference of the Z7 II here on the right compared to the Z6 II there on the left. We kind of pull these in a little bit closer. You can see how everything looks bigger because of that, you know, 1-to-1 pixel ratio. And you can just make out, you know, a little bit more detail because of that resolution here in these images. But I will say that the Z6 II looks really good as well. I mean, both images, in my opinion, are nice and sharp. Got good color here. You know, a lot of that obviously is going to depend on the lens that's used. So for these shots, I use the Nikon 100 to 400 millimeter lens, which is a great lens. And so yeah, like I said, you can kind of notice a little bit more detail here in the Z7 II because of that resolution, but both images look fantastic to me. Now what we're going to do here is we'll look at a downscaled Z7 II image. So I basically just took that Z7 II image, downscaled it to the 24 megapixels, and exported as a TIFF. And now if we take a look here, notice that there's really not much difference anymore at all, because the resolutions now are identical and we're pretty much getting identical image quality as well. Kind of take a look at some of these different areas. Everything looks good. Let's take a look over here. Some of this detail. So yeah, things are pretty much identical when you downscale like that. Let's go ahead and move on to the next image here. So here we have this waterfall. So again, this was also used with the 100 to 400 millimeter lens on. And I saw this waterfall in the distance on this mountain, so I kind of zoomed into it. So if you look here, you have this water up here, and it kind of flows down the scene. Anyways, I thought that was pretty cool, but let's go ahead and compare this. So again, you can see that resolution difference over here on the Z7 II. And that just allows you to make out just a bit more detail here in the image. I can just see more of the texture, more of the lines and the cracks and everything in the rock here. You know, but the 24 megapixels is still great. Everything still looks really nice over there. You're just getting that just extra resolution on the Z7 II. And this is what you get. Let's just look at some other areas here. Let's go ahead, we'll take a quick look at the downscaled version of that right here, and pull in these areas a little bit closer. And just like that last shot, there's no difference really at all. So once you kind of get those resolutions the same, you know, as you would expect, there's not going to be any difference there. Let's go ahead, we'll move on. Got another shot here. So here we have, so this is obviously overexposed. This would probably be a good candidate for bracketing some images, but let's go ahead and just take a look here. We'll punch in. And again, you can see that resolution difference. Pretty much the same as before. You can just make out just that extra bit of detail on the Z7 II. Alright, and then just do the downscaled version of this as well real quick here. And now that they are the same resolution, there's really no difference here. Alright, got one other shot here that we'll take a look at before we get into the ISO performance. So for this this waterfall shot, I kind of focused down in here, and again, you can just make out that extra bit of detail on the Z7 II file. Obviously, there's not going to be much detail in that water there, but if you look at the rocks here, you can just make out just a bit more on the Z7 II. And then let's look at the downscaled version of that. Here we are. And now the difference has vanished. So let's go ahead and get into the ISO performance of these two cameras. So there is a base ISO difference. So the Z6 II has a base ISO of 100, and the Z7 II has a base ISO of 64. So that's 2/3 of a stop difference there. So just want to point that out here. Let's go ahead and zoom in and see if there's any difference here at the base ISO. And really there's not. I mean, both are ultra clean here at their base ISO values. Really not seeing much noise at all. So let's go ahead and move on. I don't want to spend a ton of time on these lower values, but we will go through them here. It just gets a little more interesting when we crank up the ISO. So let's go ahead here. We have 200 versus 200, and there is, again, not much noticeable difference here in terms of the noise. Everything still looks really nice and clean. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next one. This will be ISO 400 now. Let's bring these side by side. And it's still pretty close here. I feel like I can maybe see slight bit more noise on the Z7 II here, but not really too much. I'm gonna call these pretty much even still. The sky looks pretty even there. So let's keep moving up here. So this is now ISO 800. And now I'm seeing a little bit more graininess look here because of that noise on the Z8, or the not Z8, the Z7 II versus the Z6 II. And it's not a lot more noise, but I can definitely see it. Now keep in mind that even noise is, you're gonna see noise at a higher resolution in the Z7 II than you would for the Z6 II, because everything's at a higher resolution on the Z7 II, including the noise. So you can just see it a little bit more. But what happens if we downscaled the Z7 II? Let's see what happens there. So we're still at ISO 800 here, but now I have the downscaled Z7 II. So they're both at 24 megapixels now. And now I don't see that difference anymore. They basically look identical now. All right, let's go ahead and keep moving up here. Next we have ISO 1600. Take a peek up here at the top. And again, just like last time, I'm definitely seeing a bit more noise in the Z7 II. Now it's not a ton. It's not like a crazy, like drastic difference here, but I can, you know, I'm pixel peeping, and I can definitely notice just a bit more of that noise in the Z7 II file. But again, let's go ahead and look at the downscaled Z7 II file here and see if that difference is still noticeable, and it's really not. They basically look identical again. Pretty much everywhere I look. Let's look in some of these shadows. Really not a difference there when you downscale that Z7 II file. All right, let's keep moving up the range. So now we're gonna take a look at ISO 3200. And definitely noticing more, the noise is more noticeable here on the Z7 II. You know, I'm definitely seeing noise here on the Z6 II as well, but just more on the Z7 II when you're looking at the full resolution, at least. Things are kind of looking a little bit more washed out on the Z7 II as well. Just a hair more washed out, not by a ton. Losing some of that color. Let's see what happens when we look at the downscaled version here. So again, at ISO 3200. And is that difference gone? I'm gonna say, yep, pretty much. Don't see a difference. They basically look identical there when you downscale. All right. And here I just have another shot at ISO 3200, just to give kind of another example here. These are at full res, and again, you know, you can notice. Let's look at the sky here. You can definitely notice that noise a little bit more in the sky here versus the Z6 II. I mean, just all over the image, it's slightly more noticeable. And we'll just take a quick look here at the downscaled one. Let's look at that sky again. And they're basically the same as far as the noise here. Not really seeing a huge difference there. All right, let's move up to ISO 6400 now. And definitely seeing more noise, more graininess here on the Z7 II. Things are getting even more washed out here. But you know, there's still a pretty good level of detail here. You could probably clean this right up in you know, Lightroom or Photoshop or whatever, and apply a little bit of noise reduction and probably clean that up a bit. Let's go ahead and look at the downscaled version at ISO 6400 here. Is there still no difference when we downscale? I mean, it's still basically the same here in terms of noise. Yeah, okay, let's go ahead and we'll look at now this other version at ISO 6400. Let's take a look at that sky again. You can just notice a lot more noise up there on the Z7 II. Let's see here. There we go. But you know, both files are, I mean, they're noisy, but they are still producing a great amount of detail here. I think you could clean this up pretty well in post. So let's look at the downscaled version here. Again, look at the sky. And they're both pretty noisy here. I feel like I can see maybe slightly more on the Z7 II, but I think that's just because of the just a little bit of a color difference where the sky's a little bit darker here. So I think that noise is a little bit easier to notice, but they're both just about the same really, especially when you look at other areas of the image. Not really seeing a huge difference. All right, so now we'll look at ISO 12,800. So this is as high as I went here. And take a look. Both are very, very noisy. Again, with the full res Z7 II, it's more noticeable, the noise there. But when we look at the downscaled version, we're going to see that that difference, or the noticeability in the noise is gone. So they both look about the same here as far as the noise when you downscale. And take a look here, 12,800 for this shot as well. Obviously this is very, very noisy here now. You can see in the sky it almost looks like snow or something, so noisy. Let's look at the downscaled. Right here. Yep, basically now just pretty much the same. All right, and so for these next images here, these are just intentionally underexposed because I wanted to boost these images and kind of see the performance there. So this first set of images, these are underexposed by about 3 stops. So I'm just gonna increase the exposure there by 3 stops. Let's also go ahead and maybe grab the sky selection. Just wanna, that sky's a little bit overexposed. I just want to bring the exposure down a little bit there. Maybe bring down some of the highlights. This is not perfect by any stretch, but just to kind of get a little bit better image there. And let's lift the shadows slightly here, and maybe even warm up the whole image just a tad. Maybe just something like that. If we do like a before and after here, that's kind of the adjustment we've done here. Now let's go ahead, copy that and apply those settings to this image, and now we can compare, take a look. Again, these are both boosted by 3 stops, and if you don't really see much of a noise difference now. The Z7 II, I shot this at the base ISO 64, and then the Z7 II, or the Z6 II, is base ISO 100. So that might be part of the reason why we're not really seeing much of a difference when you boost by the same exposure value, which in this case was boosted by 3 stops. Let's look at the next version here, which is 5 stops. So again, I'm just gonna come in here, raise that up by 5 stops. This time, maybe let's just bring the highlights down a little bit and boost. Let's leave the shadows. Let's just leave that alone. We'll just bring down the highlights slightly there, and then maybe just warm it up just a little bit there. So before, after, just did a quick adjustment there. Just gonna copy those settings, paste it into here. All right, so I do see a bit of a color difference here, but in terms of the noise, with this kind of more of extreme exposure boost, I think the noise is essentially identical here. Now again, the base ISO is 64 for the Z7 II, so that kind of gives it an advantage over the Z6 II, it seems. Especially when you're kind of boosting things up like this. All right. So before I get into the summary here, go ahead and let me know in the comments what you think about these cameras and the test that we performed here today. And also, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit the like button on this video if you got any value from it. Thanks a lot for doing that. Definitely helps out with all the YouTube stuff. So overall, what I think here, based on these tests, is that the Z7 II is producing better image quality than the Z6 II. Now, it's not by like a crazy, insane amount or anything like that, but I'm definitely giving the edge here to the Z7 II, for a couple reasons. So the first reason that is the resolution difference. You know, that definitely does matter. I was generally able to make out a bit more detail with the higher resolution sensor. And you know, the other reason I think the Z7 II is a bit better is because of that base ISO of 64. You know, this seems to, you know, really be beneficial when it comes to post-processing, and you know, you need to like lift the exposure of the image or the shadows or something like that. I think that lower base ISO of 64 kind of helps keep the noise at bay. And you know, the other thing that lower ISO can do is allow you to, you know, potentially have a little bit slower shutter speed than if you were at like ISO 100. This might be beneficial when shooting things, you know, like waterfalls, for example. Now, when we looked at the higher ISO values, the Z6 II files, you know, definitely look cleaner than the Z7 II files that were at full resolution. But when we downscaled the Z7 II files to the Z6 II dimensions, then that difference kind of went away and the noise was pretty much identical between the two files. So, you know, although the Z7 II image quality is a bit better in my opinion, the Z6 II is still a great camera. I mean, it still produces fantastic results. And at the end of the day, I think both cameras are great for landscape photography. You know, but I'll definitely give the edge here to the Z7 II. So thanks for watching the video. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel, and I will see you on the next video.